This is the broken ribbed edging. You're looking at it on an unfinished cardigan. Full disclosure, I've put one safety pin stuck in the dress form just to hold it still. This has not been finished, as you can see, no bottom band, no ends woven in. It hasn't been washed, and it's cotton acrylic blend yarn. Broken rib means it is ribbing, knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, purl, but it isn't continuous ribbing. There are breaks in where the knits and purls occur. There are also built-in buttonhole positions so that we don't have to worry about that. You're looking at it on a cardigan, but of course it could be a blanket edging, a poncho edging, really anything that you needed to add a non-roll edging to. You could also make the other side the right side. There's nothing wrong with the look of that, but I decided to have the side with more purls visible for this particular project, so I'm going to show you how to knit it on. Another thought is that I wanted to make a pattern so that the larger sizes could use this design on a mid-gauge machine. Therefore, I wanted to add the band separately to maximize the number of stitches available to every size. But there is nothing to stop you from working this as you go if you have enough needles. The only difference will be I lowered the stitch size just a touch for this, and you wouldn't be able to do that and knit it simultaneously. Alright, we're in the middle of the project right now. I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts so you can see how it works, then we'll set you up. 10 needles is the span we're using, but on every row we will be using less than 10. Some of them will be empty. Right now it's these two center ones. The stitch size is set a little bit smaller than the main knitting. In this case I knitted the main knitting at 3 and this is 2.5. The carriage is set to knit back from hold, which you'll see why in a minute, and I am set up for the next 2 rows. Here is my cardigan front. This is what I'm edging. Trim has already been knitted onto it down here, and I am adding trim as I go with the sew as you go method. And this is where I have just hung one of these. This time we're hanging the bars, not the knots. Knot, tight little spot, bar, knot, bar. Hanging bars this time. I'm using 1 claw weight and I'm preferring the ones that I've made. These are in my Cheap Tricks and Cool Tools book. They don't tend to snag this particular yarn as much as regular claw weights. Needles all the way forward because I've stretched and hung, and so there's a little bit of stress on those needles. 2 rows. 1, 2. Before I go any farther, I always hang my next bar at this point. By the way, every other row makes a knot and every other row makes a bar. Therefore, by knitting 2 rows and hanging a bar, I'm keeping the row count identical to what it originally was. So with this bar hung, just 2 more rows before we make any changes. Hang another bar. Now we are ready for some changes. See these ladders that have been formed where the needles are out of work? There are 2 needles out of work. Count down 1, 2, 3, 4. Grab the 5th rung of the ladder. Slide behind the others and latch them up in the normal one at a time way. So we're making rib. This is actually a broken rib stitch that we're creating. Of the 2 needles out of work, I'm hanging my eventual loop on the left one. Now I have some transferring to do. I want to empty needles 3 and 4, counting from the left. So I'm going to transfer 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Same over here. That's needle 4 from the right. It's going towards the center, and this stitch is going to the right. Now I have 2 pairs of empty needles. They will make the next ladders for our next small rib segments. Double checking that I've already hung my bar. Knit 2 rows. Hang another bar. Knit 2 rows. Now I'm going to repeat what I did the last time, only on these empty stitches, or rather the ladders formed by them. Latching up 1, 2, 3, 4. Hang it to all the way to the left. Going to try to get my hand out of the way for you. So on needle 3, counting from the left, behind rungs 5 and 4, so as to grab rung 4, 3, 2, 1. Hang the stitch. Now we want to create room in the center again. Why, you may ask, is she insisting on all this transferring when I could just drop and relatch? And in fact you could, but I've tried it both ways, and if we create a 2 needle space ladder, then we don't have to ladder down and latch back up. We just have to latch back up, and I found that to be faster and less confusing. If you wanted to do it the other way, there's certainly no rule against it. And you need 2 needle spaces to replace 1 stitch, because the ladder that just forms when a strand of yarn passes the needle is not long enough. It's not as long as a whole stitch. Okay, we're ready to knit 2 rows with the 2 center needles out of work. 1, 2, hang a bar. 1, 2, hang a bar. Very easy to keep up with this hanging, unlike some sew as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Behind the 5th rung down, grab the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the way up. And put it on the leftmost empty needle. Doesn't matter if you use the right, but you do want to be consistent, and I decided to use the left. Now I'm going to empty needles 3 and 4, same as we did last time. We're working on our second repeat of the whole pattern. That's all it is. It just keeps repeating. Because of how things get, oops, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Things get transferred. There's 1 needle that may have even more than 2 stitches on it. And that is why it's easier to knit back from hold. 1, 2. Hang. 1, 2. Hang. Counting down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, behind 5, bring 4 around 5 basically, so as to be able to start our purl column. Hang this stitch to the left, repeat on the right. One little feature of this whole plan is that every time we start latching up our ladder, we exaggerate a little hole that's already formed. It's part of the design, that's fine, and it means that you have no need to worry about creating buttonholes. There are plenty of positions that a button could go through. All right, double checking. Well, I've got a split stitch. Sorry about that. My bar is hung. Everybody's transferred. No, they are not. Glad I double checked. Now you might have seen, and I felt, and I'll point out to you, this gets pretty tight as you transfer because we transferred 2 stitches away from one another, and this is cotton yarn. And this one needs to go over. That is another reason besides those I've mentioned to knit back from home, because we've done half the work for the carriage by pushing the needles forward. I'm ready to finish up. I just hung the last of my bars. If you have a row count that's a multiple of 4, this will work out perfectly. So I'll knit my last 2 rows. 1, 2. I'll do my last 2 latchings up, because this is the part of the repeat that does have 2. If it was 1, that would be fine too. And then I'll bind off. Now if you want to adjust the row count so it's a multiple of 4, this is what will happen. All right, I moved everything together because I wanted to take the spaces out, and now I'll just bind off. I'm using the transfer bind off, which is literally transfer 1 stitch over, bring the needle forward, pull through a new loop, and that's the stitch that next gets transferred over. So let me get this off the machine and show you how it looks. Let's set this up. Here's my sweater front. This is the center front edge, and we need to be very, very clear about that before beginning, so I'm double checking. Yes, it is. You could mark it with a stitch marker. In fact, let me get a paper clip. I twist these any old way. They're cheap enough. Now there's no way I can make a mistake. This is the front edge. I need to add my band from bottom to top. So my thumb's tapping the bottom. That's the cast on. And I need the knit side facing me, because we'll be using the purl side of the band as the right side in this instance. You don't have to. But if that's your choice, as it is mine, the knit side of the garment that you hang needs to be facing you. I'm going to find the very bottom stitch and hang it on a needle. So that will be the edge stitch of the band. Now let's bring forward more needles until we have 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That was one too many. And now I need to cast on. These are my band stitches. Because I am starting by hanging the garment on the right edge, one front is hung on the right edge, one on the left edge because they're symmetrical. I'm E-wrapping, moving right to left. Now, most of the time we do it left to right. But I have a reason for doing this. I want my carriage to be on the left every time I stop to manipulate things. I'm all set to knit 2 rows. Now it's time to set up for the actual pattern, which involves a span of 10 needles, but 2 out of work, numbers 3 and 4, towards the right edge, 2 in work in the middle, and numbers 3 and 4 out of work on the left edge. That's how we'll begin. At this point, I'm ready to hang a claw weight and begin knitting the repetitious design that you already saw. That's all there is to get into it. At the very beginning, when hanging the edge of a piece of fabric, it's easy to get turned around. I started with the correct orientation, and the right thing to do is to hold the fabric in that orientation and find your next bar, because it would be easy to accidentally flip it and pick up the bar this way, and it won't look quite the same. So let me release the mistake, turn it right way around, and a few rows up, this gets to be a no-brainer. It's much more obvious. There we go. Hanging on the right feels different than hanging on the left, but it's basically the same. I've done a few rows, and here is the bottom. Didn't actually start out looking this way. I'm just going to show you how we get there. This is how it starts out looking. You can use your yarn tail. If you forgot to leave one, you can always tie on down through the cast on, make a chain stitch. At the very edge is, I've tried it both ways, working inward a little bit and working at the edge, and I think the edge looks nicest. Now, when you get to these gaps that are caused by our first laddering up action, go into the hole and pick up the yarn from around it for your chain stitch. Now I think I should have 2 plain stitches to work into. Well, really cast on stitches. And into the hole. And 2 more cast on stitches probably finished up this bottom. We can pull that through and then weave in whatever yarn tail is left, or snip off if it's way too much to weave in. But that neatens it right up. Along the side, there's a tendency for that first stitch to stretch a little bit. If that happens to you and you don't care for it, use the same yarn tail before you weave it in to tighten everything up. And voila, all gone.